Welcome to Epic Stories, where hidden legends come to life. If you enjoy jaw-dropping tales of the underestimated rising to power, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Prepare yourself for a story that will shatter your expectations and redefine everything you thought you knew about justice. Corrupt officers rejoice in court freeze when a black woman unmasks as their new FBI director. A thunderous burst of laughter echoed along the corridor of Crestford's Grand Courthouse as four uniformed officers strode past flashing cameras, flashing self-satisfied grins. For months, they had danced precariously between heroism and villainy, taking advantage of a fractured system designed to hold them accountable. Yet, they had evaded every check, confident that their carefully woven net of connections would keep them untouchable. Unbeknownst to them, a solemn, poised black woman stood on the sidelines, silently observing. Within the hour, she would turn their world upside down, unearthing every sordid act they had cloaked in secrecy. Nestled amid rolling farmland and the distant glow of a sprawling metropolis lay the city of Crestford. Once a flourishing community known for its industrious families and upstanding businesses, its wide downtown boulevards and imposing courthouse perched on a gentle hill were reminiscent of a picture-perfect postcard. However, behind the veneer of small-town warmth, fear and suspicion crept among the streets. Residents bolted their doors at sundown, exchanging hushed rumors of corruption stretching to the highest echelons of local law enforcement. For a time, the Crestford Police Department CPD was held in high regard for its dedication to the community. Officers volunteered to coach youth sports, attended charity dinners, and hosted neighborhood gatherings. Gradually, though, a creeping shift occurred. Whispers of bribery, payoffs, and concealment swirled like leaves caught in a steady autumn wind. Patrol cruisers, once a sign of safety, now caused a jolt of anxiety for passers-by. Sirens at midnight heralded clandestine deals rather than legitimate pursuits of justice. The first to notice was Jacob Quinn, a local reporter for the Crestford Chronicle, who published a sequence of investigative articles exposing a worrying rise in unsolved crimes. As he delved deeper, anomalies emerged. Key evidence in major drug cases mysteriously vanished, well-connected offenders received lenient sentences, and certain members of the force experienced inexplicable increases in personal wealth. Yet every time Jacob tried to uncover more, he was met by intimidation, anonymous threats, vandalized property, or ominous messages scrawled on his doorstep. Refusing to back down, he amassed even more incriminating details. Jacob's reports singled out four CPD officers in particular: Captain John Anders, Lieutenant Matthew Lane, Sergeant Gabriel Holton, and Officer Irene Clark. Their high-profile arrests of dealers seemed to end with money going unaccounted for or critical assets disappearing from evidence lockups. Official records suffered from glaring inconsistencies, pointing to internal tampering. Whenever a thread threatened to unravel, it was discreetly severed, preventing any real inquiry. District Attorney Melinda Summers had also grown uneasy. Yet each time she tried to open a formal probe, her superiors raised concerns about her methods. The newly hired police chief, Russell Flynn, dismissed her worries with dismissive, politically soothing statements before going on to do nothing. As suspicions mounted, a sense of paranoia gripped the populace. Calls to City Hall and letters to the editor decried potential departmental rot. But at every turn, the official reply was the same: no corruption resides in the Crestford Police Department. All disciplinary matters are handled internally. As Jacob persisted, collecting tips from terrified insiders, the powers shielding Anders and his team stayed a step ahead. Key files vanished from city archives, potential witnesses were harassed or fled, and the city council remained inert. But unknown to the crooked officers, the FBI had taken notice. Sparked by Jacob's reports and an uptick in tips sent to an FBI hotline, the Bureau quietly deployed resources to Crestford. A clandestine, single-agent operation was launched from headquarters in Washington, D.C., aimed at unraveling the CPD's corruption. Even her bureau superiors didn't anticipate the extent of the rot within Crestford or how events would culminate in a shattering day in court. Beneath the CPD's flickering lights. At the heart of the Crestford Police Department, a drab, aging facility with humming fluorescent lamps, Captain John Anders reigned. Outwardly, he was the everyday cop next door, approachable, always smiling. Secretly, he was the hub of the corruption that had taken root in the city. In a cramped office furnished with cheap blinds and perpetually stale coffee, he orchestrated backdoor deals and payoffs. Instead of protecting Crestford from criminal enterprises, he managed which underworld figures could operate, collecting money in exchange for letting them run freely. Rival criminal crews were taken down with contrived arrests, and confiscated funds disappeared into the pockets of Anders and his trusted subordinates. His top lieutenant, Matthew Lane, served as muscle and enforcer. Lane's record was abundant with accolades for heroism but concealed a blind obedience to Anders. He would unflinchingly carry out any demand. Sergeant Gabriel Holton was the group's master forger, adept at altering time logs, doctoring official reports, and ensuring that high-level investigations led nowhere. If the DA's office requested a critical file, Holton arranged for it to disappear, citing a glitch or some administrative mishap. Lastly, Officer Irene Clark, the youngest of the four, proved a chameleon at community policing, approachable, warm, able to glean inside information while ingratiating herself with unsuspecting citizens. She also worked as a mole, identifying anyone who might threaten Anders's network. Together, they ruled through intimidation. Though not every CPD officer was corrupt, few had the courage to speak out against men and women who seemed above the law. Anders believed he was protecting the city by managing its criminal elements. If there must be drug trade, at least let us profit from it, he rationalized. Yet, the facade wavered as Jacob Quinn's stories began attracting outside scrutiny, including from the FBI. Anders sensed the invisible pressure of approaching investigations. To combat infiltration, he assigned Officer Clark to investigate newcomers who arrived in Crestford, suspecting an undercover presence. But months passed and she found no red flags until she encountered a reserved woman who'd recently taken a position with the county archives, Ava Caldwell. Unknown to Clark, Ava Caldwell was actually Special Agent Morgan Ashford, an accomplished FBI investigator with a history of dismantling corruption in seemingly unassailable organizations. She had grown up in a rough Detroit neighborhood and channeled those experiences into an unshakable commitment to justice, especially when it meant standing up to powerful figures. Tapped for undercover work in Crestford, she maintained the unassuming guise of an archives researcher. No one guessed that her real purpose was to compile enough evidence to topple the entire CPD ring. A city's illusions crumble. Morgan's first weeks were dedicated to blending in. She got a small rental in a quiet part of town, spent long hours at the county archives, and occasionally wrote modestly friendly columns for local newsletters, feigning a keen interest in Crestford's historical past. During these routine tasks, she noted the hush in coffee shops whenever the CPD's name came up, and how ordinary folks wore anxious expressions whenever a patrol cruiser pulled up. It was Jacob Quinn who proved an invaluable ally. He had read about Ava Caldwell's local research initiatives in a community bulletin. Sensing a sympathetic ear, he introduced himself at the coffee stand in the archives lobby. Over repeated discussions about city architecture and Crestford's heritage, Jacob cautiously dropped mentions of his investigative leads. Morgan, pretending to be a curious but mostly naive newcomer, encouraged him to elaborate. In time, he confided in her, disclosing rumors of missing evidence, criminals with suspiciously light sentencing, and City Hall's unwillingness to hold law enforcement accountable. Privately, Morgan consolidated Jacob's accounts with her own reconnaissance. Late nights in her sparse apartment, she typed detailed notes and forwarded updates to FBI superiors via encrypted channels. The instructions she received in return were consistent: gather indisputable proof of wrongdoing. An incomplete operation would do more harm than good. At the CPD, Anders felt an unnameable tension in the hallways. Something had shifted. Between Jacob's unrelenting articles and what he suspected might be FBI snooping, Anders assigned Officer Clark to investigate Ava Caldwell further. However, Morgan's background story was impeccable: forged references, falsified academic records, even receipts for a cross-state move. Without a single official slip-up, Clark couldn't pin down a reason to suspect her, though her intuition told her to remain wary. Meanwhile, District Attorney Melinda Summers found herself walking a tightrope. She had tried to pull in external auditors or request official internal investigations, only to be brushed aside by Chief Russell Flynn's breezy reassurances. City Hall demanded stability, not scandal. It was all political nonsense, Flynn insisted, telling Summers to focus her energies elsewhere. Nevertheless, mounting evidence weighed on Summers. The repeated pattern of lost case files, altered testimonies, and criminals reappearing on the streets stoked her suspicion that a well-coordinated network within the CPD was fueling the city's festering criminal undercurrent. At the same time, Jacob Quinn's continued exposés eroded public confidence, pushing more terrified residents to submit anonymous leads about how Anders's circle bullied them. The undercover agent's quiet breakthrough. After weeks of quiet infiltration, Morgan discovered a crucial lead. She learned of a decrepit factory on the fringes of Crestford, rumored to be a hotspot for smuggled contraband. Anxious locals hinted that certain favored criminals operated there, protected by CPD officers. Morgan believed if Anders were orchestrating illegal activities, the factory would be the perfect place for her to find unassailable proof. She met with D.A. Summers under clandestine conditions at a dimly lit diner outside city limits. Once Morgan discreetly showed her FBI badge, keeping the new location and identity hidden, Summers breathed a sigh of relief. "I've been praying we'd get federal assistance," Summers admitted, stirring her tea nervously. Morgan echoed that they needed to build a bulletproof case. "No matter what, we need to gather a rock-solid chain of evidence," she said. "And it has to be done without tipping off Anders." Summers told her about the near-complete roadblocks in obtaining financial records or property data on Anders's men. There were rumors of shell companies outside the state, but verifying them was almost impossible. As Morgan left the meeting, a plan began to form. If Anders's ring was truly controlling local drug distribution, maybe they'd allow certain deals in exchange for a share of the profits. That could open the door for an undercover approach. Morgan could pose as a would-be buyer or distributor from out of town, offering a substantial cut. It was beyond dangerous, but direct involvement might capture Anders's corruption red-handed. A private operation takes shape. With the Bureau's nod to proceed, Morgan Ashford adopted a dual persona. She told local small-time dealers that Ava Caldwell had connections to major urban markets looking to expand. Rumors trickled back to local hoods that she might be a valuable new partner. Meanwhile, Officer Irene Clark, suspecting something off about Ava, ramped up her quiet surveillance. She dropped by the archives unannounced, joined neighborhood gatherings where Morgan volunteered, and struck up seemingly casual conversations. Morgan feigned harmless curiosity, always wearing the mask of someone enthralled by historical records. Soon, a petty dealer introduced Morgan to a bigger fish, a contact who might connect her with the police shield she would need to move contraband safely through Crestford. This hush-hush arrangement was an open secret in the underworld. The police would look the other way, provided you paid them for protection. A meeting was arranged at the old factory on a Friday night. The Bureau insisted on minimal backup to protect Morgan's cover, so she prepared a concealed wire and camera. If Anders or one of his loyal officers showed up and admitted to the scheme, they'd have the final nail in their coffin. The fateful meeting at the abandoned factory. That Friday, Morgan drove to the outskirts of Crestford, passing a rusted sign that read "Private Property Keep Out." Under the pale moonlight, the factory's looming silhouette looked menacing, its broken windows adding to the forbidding aura. Heart pounding, Morgan parked her unremarkable sedan near a line of abandoned crates. The stench of mildew and stale machinery assaulted her senses as she ventured inside. She waited in a dimly lit chamber resonating with the dripping echo of condensation. Then voices emerged from a side entrance. 3 figures appeared. One was a wiry local dealer known as Spade. The other 2, clad in plain clothes, were none other than Lieutenant Matthew Lane and Sergeant Gabriel Holton. Morgan's breath caught. If they recognized her from any local function, her cover would be blown. "So, you're the new buyer, huh?" Lane grunted, his tone rife with suspicion. Morgan, summoning her nerve, shrugged with feigned arrogance. "That's the plan. I'm here to do business." Holton studied her. "We don't like dealing with strangers. But Spade vouches for you." The conversation quickly pivoted to logistics, how much product, distribution routes, and, most importantly, the police cut. Each word Lane uttered about protecting shipments and how the CPD would guarantee safe passage if Morgan delivered monthly payoffs was captured by her hidden camera. Her pulse surged with the knowledge this was gold. One slip, and she'd be done for. Just as Morgan convinced herself she had what she needed, another voice echoed through the shadows. "Who's this?" From behind a stack of metal scaffolding stepped Captain John Anders himself, with Officer Irene Clark trailing. Morgan's stomach knotted. Facing all 4 simultaneously made escape unlikely if they got suspicious. She forced a smile, adopting the confident stance of a hardened trafficker. Lane filled Anders in. "Cap, we're finalizing details. She claims to have big city backing." Anders glowered at Morgan. "Don't trust new faces right away." He signaled to Clark, who stared Morgan down. "I know you," Clark murmured. "Ava Caldwell, right? You came to Crestford for an archives job." Morgan gave a dismissive shrug. "Can't exactly list smuggler as my day job." She feigned nonchalance, praying they believed her. Anders hesitated, evaluating. "Fine," he said at last, though he told Clark to run a deeper background check. Morgan's internal alarm blared, her identity was in imminent danger. Despite the tension, the meeting closed with an agreement. Morgan drove away, arms trembling on the steering wheel. She had the incriminating admission recorded, but her face was now front and center to Anders and his crew. Time was running out. Closer to discovery. At dawn, she contacted Jacob Quinn. They secretly met at a deserted playground on the far edge of Crestford. Morgan handed him a flash drive containing a compressed copy of the recordings. "This is the proof you've been after," she said quietly. "But don't publish it yet. We need the authorities to act first." Jacob's face lit up with awe and dread. "We can finally bring them down. Are you sure about sharing this with me?" Morgan nodded. "You're the fallback. If something happens to me, you go public." Next, she reached out to DA Summers. They converged in a shuttered library basement, where Morgan played the audio. Summers' eyes widened. "We can charge them with racketeering, conspiracy, everything." But Morgan cautioned her that Anders was growing suspicious. "We must act fast," she insisted. The plan: gather official indictments at the federal level and conduct simultaneous arrests. The FBI wanted to ensure the evidence would hold up in court, so they urged Morgan to be patient. But she knew patience was a luxury she no longer had. That night, from her apartment window, Morgan spotted a black SUV idling across the street. She tried to calm herself, it could be a random neighbor. Yet something felt ominous. When the same vehicle appeared the following evening, her fears solidified. Late one night, pounding footsteps resonated in the hallway. She prepared for the worst, pistol in hand. Surprisingly, it was Jacob Quinn, perspiring, eyes wild. "They followed me," he panted. "A black SUV, probably Anders or his men." Morgan grabbed her go bag. "We can't stay here. As they slipped out a back exit, the SUV roared into view. A chase ensued through Crestford's dimly lit streets. Morgan's nimble driving skill eventually allowed them to lose their pursuers. They spent the night in the car, parked behind a closed gas station. Dawn saw them fleeing to an FBI-secured safe house, a nondescript building about 40 minutes outside Crestford. There, Morgan collaborated with Summers and a small federal team. The blueprint was set. Official indictments would be filed in a federal court to bypass local entanglements. Everything seemed on track until Anders got word of the looming crackdown. The cunning captain pressured local officials into holding a hearing in Crestford's courthouse, claiming the accusations were contrived and politically motivated. That forced the FBI's hand, setting the stage for a high-stakes legal confrontation. A secret director. An explosive twist overshadowed even Morgan's infiltration. She had recently been named director of the FBI. Her clandestine nomination had concluded just weeks before, but due to the sensitive nature of the Crestford sting, her appointment hadn't been publicly disclosed. She was effectively working two roles: field investigator on the ground and the Bureau's new leader. Higher-ups kept this under tight wraps to avoid jeopardizing both the mission and broader federal policy. So not even local FBI agents knew the truth about who Special Agent Ashford really was. On the scheduled day, the Crestford courthouse was abuzz with cameramen, local activists, and curious citizens. Captain Anders, Lieutenant Lane, Sergeant Holton, and Officer Clark arrived in full uniform, confident that no tangible proof of wrongdoing existed. Their attorney, a smug figure named Patrick Haywood, strutted with them, promising a swift legal victory. District Attorney Summers took her place at the prosecution table, flanked by a U.S. attorney. Jacob Quinn was front row, pen and paper at the ready. Yet, initially, there was no sign of Ava Caldwell, the rumored FBI agent. The presiding judge, Harold Norris, called the hearing to order. Haywood seized the moment. These baseless allegations are the product of an overzealous DA. My clients are exemplary law enforcers. We demand immediate dismissal. Before Summers could respond, the courtroom doors swung open. Morgan Ashford walked in, wearing a tailored navy suit and emanating authority. An electric hush fell over the crowd. Summers rose, voice reverberating with purpose. Your Honor, this is Special Agent Morgan Ashford, whose undercover efforts brought forward substantial evidence of these officers' corruption. The four defendants grew visibly nervous. But Summers had more to reveal. Additionally, Ms. Ashford has just been confirmed as the new director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. A collective gasp erupted. Cameras whirred in a frenzy. Anders and his cohorts were ashen. Their lawyers stammered, "This is an outrage and ambush." Judge Norris demanded order, gavel echoing. "Is this true?" he asked Morgan directly. Composed, she replied, "Yes, Your Honor. My appointment was kept confidential to protect the integrity of the investigation. I possess audio, video, and documented proof linking these defendants to a web of corruption that spans drug trafficking, bribery, and racketeering." Anders lost his composure, leaning over to Haywood in a panic. Officer Clark hung her head, tears threatening to spill. Sergeant Holton looked ill, while Lieutenant Lane seethed. As Morgan systematically outlined the evidence, recorded negotiations, witness statements, forged records, the group's cockiness dissolved. Haywood attempted a futile protest about entrapment, but the judge waved him off after seeing the meticulously gathered evidence. Bail is denied, Norris declared, pending a full federal trial. Court officers cuffed each defendant. Anders raged, "This is a setup. She lied to us." But no one would heed his complaints. Journalists captured every dramatic instant, ensuring the people of Crestford would finally witness justice in action. The fallout and glimmer of hope. In the hours after the hearing, Crestford felt eerily hushed. Those who had lived in trepidation under the CPD's oppressive reach now emerged, some tearful, some jubilant. The once routine sight of police cruisers no longer provoked dread. An uncertain sense of renewal took hold. Simultaneously, the indicted officers languished in a stark holding area at the federal courthouse, grappling with the realization that their reign was finished. Anders, stripped of uniform and illusions of invulnerability, wrestled with the knowledge that he had become the very kind of criminal he once pledged to fight. Lane's bravado morphed into silent fury, Holton despaired at his inability to spin the evidence in their favor, and Clark tearfully confronted the betrayal she'd inflicted upon her own community. Meanwhile, across Crestford, local gatherings formed with unaccustomed optimism. Activists urged strict reforms in the police department, seeking thorough background checks for new hires, mandatory body cameras, and robust community oversight. Business owners rallied behind calls for improved policing that didn't exploit them. Parents, once petrified of letting their children roam the streets, spoke publicly about wanting an environment where trust in law enforcement was the norm, not a rarity. Chief Russell Flynn promptly resigned, though speculation abounded about potential charges of gross negligence. The mayor, facing a barrage of public outrage, barely clung to office. Through it all, Jacob Quinn, once threatened and mocked, found himself hailed as a hero by national journalists. He never let the praise go to his head. Instead, he dedicated coverage to the everyday bravery of locals who had quietly endured oppression, waiting for the day they could speak freely. In the courthouse's secured offices, Director Morgan Ashford oversaw the final paperwork with her newly assembled federal team. She felt an odd mixture of triumph and weariness. The victory was indisputable: the CPD's corruption had been demolished. However, the cost was steep: an entire city traumatized, a department in shambles, and personal risk that had nearly claimed her life. District Attorney Summers joined her, offering a weary smile. The press is clamoring for a full statement from the Bureau. They want to know what's next. Morgan's answer was resolute: I'll give them the truth. Then we'll make sure Crestford sees genuine reforms. We owe them that much. A short time later, in front of a cluster of microphones and glaring camera lenses, Morgan delivered her speech. Crestford demonstrates that communities can overcome corruption when they stand together. No badge is a shield from accountability. We must remain vigilant, working hand in hand with honest officers and dedicated public servants to reclaim the soul of our city. She fielded questions from national media about how entrenched corruption could remain hidden for so long, about the burden of her secret infiltration while also stepping into the highest position in the FBI. Calmly, she answered each, emphasizing systemic weaknesses, the courage of whistleblowers, and her unwavering commitment to tackling misconduct even in small towns. The press conference ended, and Jacob Quinn approached, gratitude evident in his eyes. "Thank you for trusting me," he murmured. Morgan nodded. "You never gave up on the truth. That's how these stories come to light." Soon after, inside a quiet anteroom, Morgan lingered by a window overlooking Crestford streets. She thought of her own path, a childhood overshadowed by injustice, the relentless pursuit of a safer world, and the risk-laden infiltration that had brought her to this point. This city, once consumed by corruption, now stood at the dawn of a massive rebuilding process. Many obstacles remained, but hope was stirring. Over the subsequent days, fresh officers replaced Anders's indicted loyalists. Many came from neighboring counties, praised for impeccable records. They met with local community groups, forging relationships from scratch. Jacob Quinn's articles pivoted from exposing rot to spotlighting Crestford's cautious revitalization. District Attorney Summers pressed forward, broadening investigations and filing charges against any who had aided the conspirators. Yes, the city bore scars. Trust could not be rebuilt overnight. People still regarded patrol cars with residual wariness. But progress was visible. The local diner, once overshadowed by rumors of hush deals, again bustled with families eager to enjoy coffee without fear of a police presence. In school corridors, kids no longer whispered about dangerous cops, but about the next big game or upcoming community fair. Morgan Ashford soon left for Washington, returning as the FBI's newly affirmed director. Yet she remained committed to Crestford's transformation, tasking a specialized oversight unit to monitor CPD reforms. Before her departure, she visited Jacob Quinn and District Attorney Summers one last time. "The city's future is in your hands," she told them. "Keep fighting for transparency. Keep defending the rights of every resident here." With that, she drove away, her official SUV blending into traffic as it headed for the highway linking Crestford to the nation's capital. The lessons gleaned from this small but fierce city lingered with her, evidence that evil flourishes in secrecy, but can never stand for long against those who dare to stand for truth. Captain John Anders and his cohorts had believed themselves untouchable, that they ruled Crestford's fate. But in the end, no uniform or web of local influence could save them from the hammer of justice wielded by a woman they had underestimated at every turn. For the community, the experience became a testament to how corruption withers when confronted by unwavering determination. The darkest nights were swept aside by the brilliant illumination of a single unstoppable principle, that real justice may be delayed but can never be denied. Crestford learned that truth can, and will, triumph even if it arrives in the form of a poised FBI director who risked everything to expose what lay hidden in the shadows. Thank you for joining us on Epic Stories. If this enthralling tale of hidden corruption, daring undercover work, and ultimate redemption spoke to you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment below. Your support fuels more riveting stories that uncover secret heroes and celebrate the relentless pursuit of justice.